I'm willing to bet that anybody's listening to us now, every time I name one of these, every time I give a number and then a title, someone flashes into that listener's head before the description even, right?
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
40 feet, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
Trouble, we have shot fired, shot fired.
Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down. Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, where we learn how to serve, strive, and succeed in our challenging careers as first responders. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use to lead with vision, honor your oath, and take care of your mind and body, and be the one in someone's time of need. My name is Garrett Tesla. I'm a full-time sergeant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm on a mission to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe, knowing they spent their time in a worthy cause. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at the Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure you can join our Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and you get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads and other information that I share that I don't share on other platforms. I also send out content that's exclusive, and you just don't want to miss something that might be able to help you in your life. Join our list at thesquadroom.net, and at the end of the show, I'm going to tell you about something I'm starting that I'm very excited about with the list. So make sure you check it out at thesquadroom.net. All right, my guest for this episode is Pete Havel. Pete is the author of The Arsonist in the Office, Fireproofing Your Life Against Toxic Coworkers, Bosses, Employees, and Cultures. Whew, I can't imagine that any of us deal with any of that when we go to work, right? This book that Pete wrote, it's an awesome book. I read it cover to cover before we talked. It was named Amazon's #1 hot new release for management books and has reached #2 on Amazon's bestseller list in multiple categories. Pete is a speaker, trainer, and consultant for organizations ranging from Fortune 500 companies to churches to nonprofits to law enforcement organizations and first responder associations and departments. He focuses his attention on helping organizations fix people problems, build stronger leadership, and create or strengthen productive and healthy workplace cultures. You can learn more about Pete at PeteHavel, that's HAVEL.com. Now, I can't imagine that anybody out there is thinking that they can think of somebody that they work with at their agency, whether you're law, fire, or EMS, that they would consider toxic. And of course, I'm being sarcastic because the job itself, regardless of which profession you're in, but the job itself, when I say the job, I just mean any of us, the job is so toxic and draining on your mentality if you're not careful that it becomes insidious. And one of the things we talk about, he has 10 toxic types of people that he talks about in the book. And we go through each of those 10 types and how to identify that kind of person, how to work with them, how to lead with them. And I share my experiences as a sergeant and leading those kinds of people, as a coworker trying to work with those kinds of people. And we go back and forth talking about how we can best serve and lead those kinds of people towards a more productive working environment. But as we talk, I think you might also see how easy it is for you to become one of those toxic people without even knowing it. And it was only through hindsight in our discussion when Pete and I were talking, hindsight provides you some perspective to realize that there were plenty of times in my own career, some not even that long ago, where I was probably maybe not toxic. I'm sure I was at times, but if I wasn't toxic, I was headed that way, and having to get my mind right, having to hit pause, having to do some of the things we talk about in the show to bring myself back to center. and to make sure I wasn't going to take down the ship or take down anybody with me. It's a great episode. It's chock full of advice on how to lead people with purpose and, of course, to be the one. So here we are with Pete Havel. Pete Havel, welcome to the Squad Room. Thanks for being here, Pete.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You are the author of a new book. I love the title alone, The Arsonist in the Office, Fireproofing Your Life Against Toxic Coworkers, Bosses, Employees, and Cultures. And, I thought to myself when I saw the book, well, that certainly doesn't apply to law enforcement because there are certainly no arsonists in my office. I say, of course, sarcastically, because, I'd like to think we're special, but I think I talk to law enforcement officers all over the country, all over the world, really, as you do when you go and you speak in front of a lot of these the chiefs organizations and the sheriffs. And this is a problem, isn't it? Even in our industry.
It's a huge problem. And from what I hear from folks in law enforcement and what's been said to me in all sorts of different ways, y'all in law enforcement have some amazing talents. I mean, you can face down somebody who wants to do you harm that may be in all sorts of different situations where they can adversely affect your life when you're dealing with a potential criminal. But it's a lot more challenging for y'all dealing with those people in an office setting. That person that may have been your longtime buddy, but is also as toxic as can be and is blowing up stuff around the station in terms of the culture.
It's it's something I didn't really expect when I started. And I want to preface too that, like, one of the things about the show, I never talk about my agency directly, really, as to try and avoid some unnecessary drama. But so when I'm talking about what I've seen over my years, but also what I know from other agencies, and like I said, what I've talked about with other agencies. So forgive me if sometimes when I'm talking in generalities, I'm kind of combining my experiences or what I know from working with others. But I think the primary factor, or the common denominator, I guess, more so, uh, from all the places I've heard from, and also in my history in private or in public companies, is that the common denominator is humans. We all have humans involved, and that seems to be where we get stuck, right?
Absolutely.
Uh,
Always is, and we're always finding new ways to not improve on our ability to deal with them.
so before we jump too far in, describe for people what you describe as the arsonist in the office. Who is that?
Sure. The arsonist is that person with just enough power to wreck the organization's culture, the careers in it, or the company itself. They use a lot of different tools, everything from sabotage to gossip to leaking confidential information about people or the organization. People that just undermine the basic guidelines of right and wrong. And one of the biggest common denominators that you've got is they tend to be people that are pretty charismatic. And if you're not watching them closely, they tend to be people that are pretty well liked and that they're pretty productive, but they use that productivity to cause a lot of problems.
So this isn't necessarily like the people we think of, or I often think of, the kind of disgruntled, angry, salty guy that's walking around that just reeks of angst and annoyance at the whole process. You're saying these are people who are a little bit more surreptitious in how they go about manipulating people. Is that right?
Well, and it can really vary.
Mm-hmm.
But you may have that disgruntled person that at some point in their lives may have been that very very friendly, outgoing person, or somebody that is just a productivity drain right now. At any point in their career, they could have been something else. But things happen, people change, and a lot of times, if they start burning things down, they use that productivity for absolutely nothing good.
Now you have a interesting background in comparison to most of the guests on my show who have some immediate nexus to law enforcement, such as they're active duty cops, or they're retired chiefs, or they've got some practice in policing directly. Let's give everybody a background on what what you've done in the past and how you came to write this book in the first place.
Well, I guess I would say that there is a common denominator, and that is both of us deal occasionally with some bad characters.
Mm-hmm.
Mine tend to be elected officials. I've spent most of my career in politics. You usually get them after they plead out. Before they plead out and after at times. But yeah, I dealt with a lot of different people in my career as a lobbyist. And then I've also done some crisis communications work for companies dealing with scandals. And of course, you nobody ever gets into those in law enforcement, but just hypothetically,
Yeah, never.
dealt with some of those, and so that's my background. And where another similarity would be is you are paid to read people. You are you're analyzing that person in a matter of a few seconds or a brief conversation,
Mm.
what they're up to, what they're thinking, where they may be leaning in terms of their behaviors, their actions, their thought process. And I thought I was pretty good at it until I hit the point and the job that transformed me into an author. But I didn't learn it the easy way. Found myself in a position. I'll make it real quick so we can get to all the great questions you have. Walked into this new job that had great pay, great benefits, all this stuff. And hours into the job, I'm called into the CEO's office, who explains to me that I've been hired not only for my background, but they think I just may be able to deal with the employee that he goes on to call the arsonist. And it was somebody, it happened to be a woman, but this isn't a book about male versus female conflict. But it was a woman who at that point had filed what they believed to be about 36 false complaints. And they realized they really had no mechanism because of all the other bad actions that had taken place within the organization. They had no guts, interest, or any existing process anymore to deal with the person that was the false accuser, or the person that was sabotaging. They had pretty much decided, we're going to keep this person internal because we're afraid of what they might do to us from the outside with leaking information. And they had a file on everybody and had made all sorts of allegations against people in leadership. They didn't know what to do with them, so they decided to keep them internal, and then hired me to essentially partner with this person in my job. And you can just imagine what a disaster that turned into.
Yeah, you refer to this woman throughout your book as Hazel, and it reads like no way. like every cliche of this arsonist, as you call him, seems to be wrapped up into this one person. So it sounds like a nightmare, and that's what I think a lot of us deal with at some levels. Maybe not someone that extreme, but certainly when you come into, I'll give you a quick story. So this is back in 2012. I was about to get promoted to sergeant, and I ran into a friend who asked me how I thought the job was going to be. And I thought, it's really I thought it's an easy job. You have the law, you have policies and procedures to help guide you and make your decisions, basically make decisions for you. And you just got to keep everybody safe and on task. And that's really all you have to do. And that the people will run themselves. They're all adults. And I couldn't have been further from the truth. I spent and still, probably, I think any sergeant would probably agree, you spend probably 85% of your time on personality and personnel issues, not on the minutia or logistics of what it takes to do police work. It's all about the people.
That's right.
Have you found that to be similar?
No doubt. And that is that 80 to 85% includes time when they can actually likely do something about the problem, and that they're able to head things off. Um, in my case, my manager had been stripped of pretty much any tool that they could use against the employee because they didn't want to rattle her at any time. And so it was just one explosion after another that was occurring. But yeah, that problem, and I hear it all the time. No surprise to you, hear it all the time about the sergeants that both the ones that receive specialized training in management and leadership and the ones that don't are spending virtually all their day putting out fires, babysitting, managing, breaking up arguments of one kind of another, and that's a lot of time, a lot of stress. Probably a lot of both sergeants and line officers that at some point because of it decide I'm going to go do something else. It's not worth it.
Hmm. Yeah, and that add all that to the outside pressures and the
Oh,
pressures
yeah.
from the media and society and everything right now, and it's enough to cripple someone even with a good spirit. I think there's a specific book, or sorry, a specific chapter in the book, that you detail. I think it's about 10 different types of toxic workers or toxic coworkers, and I thought it would be helpful to actually dissect that chapter with you because I find that we have a lot of listeners on the show who are new to the job and who are trying to navigate maybe their first real job or their first time experiencing a co-working environment like this. You also have a lot of new supervisors who want to be good leaders and want to understand how to navigate some of these people and how to manage them. So I just thought we'd kind of go through this list, if that's all right with you, and touch on each of them because I think it'd be really helpful.
Sounds great.
All right, so again, this is from your book, The Arsonist in the Office. And the first type of toxic coworker you talk about are the belittlers. And I'll quote directly from the book. These people hurl insults and put downs at every opportunity. They're better than you, and their work is too. Just ask them.
Uh,
I go ahead.
I mean, pretty much from grade school on, we see these people, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
The and let me preface all of these by saying, if the leadership in a department or any company um, sets the right tone and culture, you will always have these people because, like we talked about, we're all human and we could be jerks one day, wonderful the next. That part will never change. There's always going to be a little bit of fluctuation, but you put the right culture in place, the right tone in place, and leadership is following their own rules. Some of this stuff goes away, or it only comes out every once in a while when people are going through a rough spell. So we're never going to be able to contain these things completely, but we can minimize it where possible. Yeah, the belittlers, and certainly early in careers when there's those formative moments. And I know you guys have what I've heard in various terms called the 7-year itch, when people are thinking about, do I stay, do I go? These people are killers for that, because when you're entering a job, you want to take pride in what you're doing, and the decisions you make are going to be looked at, especially when they're the right ones. They're going to be looked at in a good and positive way. But the belittlers are the ones that are never going to tell you good job, never going to be reassuring. They're the ones that always have their boot on the throat of a good mood in the office. And yeah, that's where leadership really needs to set that positive tone, and everybody down the line needs to, for lack of a better word, enforce it through also positive things.
Yeah. One of I think something I've seen in law enforcement in general is there is such a fear of being this belittler or being the arrogant guy, the who's boastful and who feels that their work is better, that and I think it's beaten into us in the academy too, and in that process and in field training, where you're the rookie. We're in a paramilitary organization. You don't know nothing because you just started. Let me show you how it really works. That kind of culture. And so we're so fearful of showing when we do have a skill or we do have accomplished something like legitimate, that we really downplay it to our detriment, because we don't want to come off this way. How do you suggest people accentuate or highlight their strengths, especially in like promotional interviews, without turning into this guy?
Yeah, I think you have to be, and every culture is going to have its differences and nuances. And I always tell people one of the most important things you can do in any job is to learn the culture. Because yeah, you don't want to be seen as the boastful jerk that's turning everybody off. But you can also state for people that need to know the information, what you did, maybe your interest in helping find those opportunities again. I spoke to somebody at a department a few months back, fairly new officer, I should say fairly new sergeant, and had worked with some procurement and had found a way to save a bunch of money with some communications equipment. And he popped his head up, was proud of what he had done, and then gets shot down unmercifully. And he learned that essentially, look, do the work, make sure that the right people know it, but you don't have to be waving the flag all the time. And um, he wasn't doing it in a boorish way, but was telling the wrong people. Well, he wasn't targeting the information to the right people. He was going to everybody, and half the people didn't care. Uh, so
Know your audience, right?
yeah, know your audience. That's right.
All right, so that's an excellent one, and one that we certainly deal with. Number two, that's also one, the credit thieves, again from your book. They take all the public glory for other people's hard work. It's by design to put other people's in a lower position compared to them, and to help them move up the food chain. In an interview, if you're being inundated with I, make a note.
Yeah. And that we'll talk about that interview part in just a minute. That is definitely for the managers and finding out who you're hiring well before you're stuck with them. But those credit thieves, and let's put that in maybe a couple different relationships. Let's say officers and sergeants, and then deputy chiefs and chiefs. Certainly, again, you want to know the room, right? You want to know what you can say and can't say. But as in that officer and sergeant relationship, um, you want to do good things to make your boss look good, and that's certainly a good thing. You may want some credit along the way, but for those sergeants that are thinking, looking at every point that goes on the board that the officer puts up, if you want the respect of your people that are working for you, you need to let the higher ups know, publicly. Well, not to the general public, but to the department, that one of my guys did the right thing, and here's what happened, and let that be known, because there's no more golden opportunity to put somebody on the right track than show them that there's value in doing that hard work. And the credit thieves start wrecking shop on the culture if people start getting the message that every good thing I do, my boss is going to be stealing as their own. There's nothing good that comes from that.
One of the I totally agree with that, and I think it's natural for anybody, again, because of our own ego and our own ambitions, to want to make sure that we get our attention in that. But I've found that, especially as a sergeant, as that front line, if you give the credit where the credit's due, and you, what I say, take the assist, right? Like if you're the sergeant in charge of someone doing good work, that means you're doing the right work to help them achieve that good work, if that makes any sense, right? Like you've assisted them to succeed, and you're a part of that process, and it's seen and it's obvious by the people in the chain of command. You don't have to go trumpet it around. But the minute you try to weasel in on the credit for something that you really didn't have anything to do with, maybe other than being the supervisor for the shift that day, that people see right through that real fast.
And they're going to remember it more than anything else you ever do.
Yeah. Got a lot.
And nobody wants that guy moving up because they're going to they know they're going to steal the credit at some point in some other project.
So, but for the officer then, or this could happen at any rank. So the officer or the sergeant whose idea is being taken by lieutenant, how do you recommend they address these things with the supervisor? I mean, we get asked about this occasionally, and my recommendation typically is, let them take the credit. They'll either be seen as someone who's stealing the credit by everybody else, and they're well known for it already, or they look good, and it doesn't really matter as long as you look good to them and you're building trust with that supervisor by doing the good work, and it's going to allow you to go out and do more good work.
That's right. And one of those things about learning the culture is learning when sometimes you just have to eat it, and take the knee and realize, okay, this time around, I'm not getting the credit, and especially if the credit isn't necessarily going to get you. In most cases, it's not going to get you more money instantly. It's not going to get you a promotion instantly. But if everybody knows what happened for the most part, you're helping yourself
Mm-hmm.
to move forward. And what you don't want to have happen is if you have a supervisor who manages through retaliation, and then you've got serious problems, as I'm sure you've heard about in different departments. That starts becoming a problem for everybody, and it's hard to talk about. It's hard to get a read on because you don't know who in your organization is going to back you up and who's going to side with the person that's sabotaging you.
Yeah, that can get sketchy real quick. Right.
And
All right.
rarely
Go
does
ahead.
anybody at the bottom of the totem pole win those battles.
Yeah, and by rarely, I think you probably mean next to never.
Exactly.
You're- yeah. All right. So number 3, again, straight from the book. I think these are just great descriptions. The finger pointers. They deflect blame onto others when things go wrong. They also tend to be among the biggest saboteurs in an organization. Remember, a question on professional challenges they faced previously or questions about their past managers may smoke them out in an interview. Explain that one for us.
Sure. And I would definitely say on this, finger pointers / saboteurs. So they're a combination of these people that may see something going wrong and either blame you for it or set you up to take the blame. We've seen a lot of cases with in your profession, people that are doing the right thing and they say a couple wrong words, and the next thing they know, they have a complaint coming out against them, something that everyone in the room thought was a joke, but it goes on the record, and you've got a problem suddenly that you need to, and a hole that you need to dig out of. So you've got some people that are inclined to sabotage you, and then you've got other people that when an incident takes place, suddenly, while most people are looking around the room thinking, this is one of those things that just happened to happen. They've got the long knives out for you, and they're going for blood, and they want to see how tough you are, how strong you are, and whether you have the fight to go back at them. And some people do, and some people become intimidated at that point and thinking, this isn't. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to make any waves. And if I remember hearing this a bunch in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing, and it is an awful position to be in, where you can hear your mouth. You can hear yourself talking and thinking, every word I say, no matter how right I am, people are just looking at me differently at this point, and I sound guilty no matter what I've done. I think the finger pointers, the saboteurs, are pretty good at putting people in those situations. And the hardest part is when you've got a culture that may be accepting it, encouraging the undercutting of coworkers. They look at it as, let's have just a battle and see who comes out on top. You have no safety in your job at that point, occupational safety, to come out of there, and that's hell. It's absolute It's absolute hell. In terms of the how a manager can come out about find out about that in an interview, I always suggest asking people about past situations on how they've dealt with others, specifically supervisors or coworkers, maybe how they've worked on a project. And if you're hearing nothing but either them bragging about themselves or blaming everybody else, uh, pay attention. Because number one, that's a really dumb thing to say in an interview, but people say it every day. But number two, you're looking at somebody who may be targeting you at some point.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of examples of that in the profession, and like you said, there still seems to be a lot of agencies, and I get instant messages or DMs all the time from guys who are in agencies where it's coming to work is a blood sport, at least from a psychological standpoint, where the something like 80%, and I kind of pulling that number out of thin air, but it's something high like that. Something like 80% of the stress on a police officer is the organizational stress. It has nothing to do with the idea of being shot at or the night shift or screaming down the highway at 130 miles an hour, lights and sirens. It's about, how's my boss going to treat me? Does the department have my back if something goes wrong? And am I valued? Uh, it just kind of stuns me that that's still an issue.
Let me interview you on that question.
Sure.
Before you joined the force, if somebody had asked you what you thought, how much is office politics going to be affecting me? I'm guessing that number would have been flipped.
Oh, absolutely. Because I came out of my audience knows a little bit about this. I came out of the music industry, right? So I came into law enforcement rather late. I mean, not rather late, but like late 20s. And I had spent the first 10 years of my career working in music, which is notoriously competitive, right? Not on the band side only, but on the business side. And I was on the business side. I wanted to be one of the guys that was sitting there backstage with all the lanyards, hanging out with the rock bands, and like being able to brag that I discovered, the next big thing. Turns out I was horrible at that, right? And so, uh, but it's extremely competitive and it's extremely manipulative and backstabbing, and games are played and all that. But I expected that because I just kind of knew that. My expectation coming into law enforcement was exactly what you said. It'd be flipped, and that this would, again, kind of like a military organization. We have our act together. Uh, it's professional. We have a shared common vision, which is true. But I think I put too much weight in the idea that because we have a shared common vision and a shared common goal, that a lot of that stuff would be put aside. And obviously, that's not the case.
Amazing.
All right, so let's not jump ahead, but move on to number 4. This one should strike a chord with everybody as well. The gossips. Because law enforcement basically is like high school, I've learned as well. These people, again, from your book, these people spread gossip, lies, half truths, and whatever else they can find to create chaos through their constant chatter. While some cannot stop talking out of habit, others gossip with an agenda. Because of the agenda-driven gossips, always be careful about what you say to anyone at work. If you do not want your personal life or what you thought were private comments about people at work to spread to everyone else in the company, don't say anything we're spreading. Also, don't be seen around gossips if you don't want to be labeled as one. If you get branded as a gossip, expect to catch some of the blame when one of the gossips goes too far. You'll be an immediate suspect and lose people's trust. Tough to detect in the interview process, managers should be prepared to step in when the gossips become a problem. I think any cop with more than 2 days on is probably nodding his head right now about how much gossiping goes up on and how we really are scared of our own shadows in a sense about what other people think of us or what we think of other people, or who's in good with command that day, or vice versa. Or even worse, maybe command's participating in the gossip. you know what is it about gossiping that you see as such an arsonist activity?
Yeah, it is. It is so corrosive because, well, a few different things. And let me start off by saying that this is something that leadership in departments can eliminate. I'm just guessing, probably half. Half of all gossip out there, if they are consistent and truthful in their communications to the organization. So all the speculation about what's going to happen, all these different things, top leadership has a clear vision. Some of the gossip is going to go away. Certainly not the officer on officer gossip, but some of it, at least from people just coming up with their theories about what's going on in the department. Leadership serves as the example, a good example. A lot of that's going to go away. But in terms of that corrosive nature of the relationship gossip, with the Miranda warning stuff, is discussed to be that it will be can and will be used against you in the court of law. Well, you guys are using it against each other in conversations, and yeah, I do realize there's some time on the radios, et cetera, to be speculating about who's doing what, et cetera. So it's always going to be the case, but you start breaking down the bonds of trust, especially when it goes personal. And the greatest fear I know anybody in law enforcement has is that people not having their backs. And
Yeah.
if you're not going to have your back in a professional environment, take it out into the field and see what happens. And it's asking a lot, but where you can cut down on the levels of gossip, the better those bonds are going to be. And it's just a no tolerance type of policy on gossip probably is not going to eliminate it, but starts at the top, hope for the best, enforce like crazy, and just have it coming down throughout the organization of guys, this isn't how we operate or should operate. And, if you've got something to say it. If not, shut up.
Yeah, you touch on something too about like the stuff that comes out of an organization and like the organizational gossip, what's happening with the organization or agency. And I'm not the first to bring up the point that, inside, if there's a communication vacuum, people are going to put their own two and two together, and two and two is going to make five. They're going to fill in the gaps of what they know and what they don't know, and they're going to make connections that probably aren't correct in the absence of correct communication from the top down. And that's certainly one way to resolve the gossip, like the organizational gossip. And then, one thing I always think about, because like currently I'm assigned to internal affairs. Now we call it professional standards, but it's based, internal affairs. And I joke because you would think I would be the most in on the rumors and gossip and knowing what's going on in the back office, but I have made such a point of staying out of the rumor mill that it's funny because by the time I learn something, it's like common knowledge everywhere else. But it lends to your credibility with your coworkers. There's people in any organization where if I always tell people like, and I've admonished younger deputies in the past when they start to gossip about stuff and say, look, if you're gossiping about, Deputy A, there's nothing for me to think that you're not going to gossip about me behind my back when you walk away from me. And so be careful what you bring to the table, because it may not be something, it may be a taste that you leave in our mouths that we don't want to involve you with, or we don't want to experience you.
Yeah, you're absolutely the top suspect, and who's going to want to move that person up in to another level of trust. Bring somebody that is going to have even more power to spread the poison.
One of the frustrating things I've heard from people is when it's someone in their command above them, above their rank, who's telling them things, and they're like, I don't think I should be hearing this or participating in this conversation, and having to gently extricate themselves from an awkward scenario where where their boss is just laying it on thick.
And that's where you start having the lawsuits, all sorts of different things that that could be generated by that if it's hurting somebody's career or puts them in some sort of legal peril, you name it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. I'm going to pause real quick because, of course, my battery's dying. So I'm going to go grab my charger because I had to run into the bathroom, but I'm recording in the garage, but I'll be right back. Just give me 1 second. All right. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. So then moving on to number 5. The title of this just cracks me up. The wet blankets. These buzzkills may not be productive, but they excel at complaining and criticizing. They steal people's joy, complain about pay raises not being big enough, and pick apart successful initiatives. They may also look to rain on your parade when it comes to acknowledging your accomplishments, since one of the most important things teams can do to form bonds is celebrate victories. These folks can hurt your company's morale in good times and bad. You can try to filter them out in the interview process through questions that help you understand whether they are going to be a positive force within the organization or not. The wet blankets, yes, the salty guys. How do we deal with them?
Well, I'd say this certainly on the hiring process these days, and I know it is hard for departments to hire right now. We talked about the climate, everything that went on last summer and spring, all these different dynamics that are taking place. But if you're not incorporating a little bit about attitude in what is an extremely difficult job, you're missing an opportunity to find people that are either going to be a good fit or a terrible fit. You don't need Miss Mary Sunshine to be serving in every officer role, but you need people that are buying into the culture, accept the mission, and when victories come, man, time to celebrate and and boost that up because there's going to be some hellish days. There's going to be the problems, and you need as many people as possible to bring some light to some dark situations. In terms of filtering them out in the process, one of the things I talk about quite a bit in the book and to chiefs conferences is getting to know these officers, finding out who they are, talking about them personally, ask them questions of just getting a sense of whether they're the type of person that you want to be dealing in tough situations with. And I know there's the psychological testing that's done frequently, but you also just want is this person going to be a fit in other ways? And that's something you need to think about no matter how many vacancies you have.
So for, a lot of us, those people are already there's a good chance that when we're talking about those people in our organizations, my experience, they've been on longer than you have.
Oh yeah.
It's almost never the new guy that's the wet blanket or the salty guy. It's the guy who's been around 20 years and is just over it, right? Uh, so if someone's ingrained and protected by civil service and not going to get fired, and they're kind of like your Hazel in some ways, they're just there, and you got to deal with them. How can a middle management guy or a frontline supervisor handle somebody like that?
Well, a couple of the different things that can be done there. Number one, that's certainly a job for leadership to sit down with these people and have heart to heart talks with them. Like you say, most departments, they are going to be ingrained in one way or another, but you need to keep riding them. You need to be certainly following your own advice if you're a leader. But the other thing you can do, and I've talked to some chiefs whose specialty is to come in and clean up departments. Set some standards for these people. Test them in various ways. Provide them the training, what the expectations are within the organization. Set some things within the culture that can put them in moments where either they're going to go with the flow and go follow the program, or they're going to look really, really bad. And in most cases, people don't want to be embarrassed. And in a lot of cases, you'll find from human nature, people are at least going to fake their way through some of these tougher situations to be seen by their peers as, I don't know, slightly human.
Yeah, and then it's closely related to the wet blanket, I think, is number 6 in your book. You call them the slackers. Often we call them the slug. And of course, they know it sometimes too. They shrug off responsibilities and leave them to others. It starts early in life, probably with group projects at school, where one student slacks off and the rest of the group is left to pick up the slack. Don't worry, though; they'll help you out in accepting the credit.
You know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and I always say when we get to that part that my soon to be going off to college daughter had me throw in the part about the group projects because she's seen the slackers in her school.
Well,
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny you say that. Just to tie into that, my wife is in grad school right now and was just complaining about this the other day with grown adults. So it still is a thing, you know.
doesn't change.
Mhm.
Yeah, and often you find that these people are connected to somebody, and they're pretty hard to get out because they've usually gotten in some place. Because in most jobs, and civil service may be quite a bit different in this way, and I know that it is. You're going to have some standards at some point that will often catch these people in the private sector that some supervisor somewhere has drawn the line. But you guys in law enforcement are often stuck with these folks. You do the best they can. You don't put them in responsibilities where they are going to figuratively or literally hurt you because their laziness. Certainly, in the case of law enforcement, you don't want somebody being a sloth to risk somebody's future or family.
Yeah.
So you isolate them where possible. You inform them, you educate them about the expectations, and get rid of them where you can. But in y'all's cases, make sure they do as little harm as possible because they're not going to do much good.
Yeah, kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning, and my assumption that sergeanting was easy. This was the big one where I had to learn how to navigate this, you know, because again, civil service protections, government protections, these people have a job for life, and very, very hard to get rid of them in government work, even when you want to, or even when the command staff or the executives or the chief have the desire to get rid of them. It's very hard, but to even get them on board with thinking that this is important enough to fight is almost impossible. So there's many times where we just have to accept the fact that we work with these people. They will do the absolute bare minimum, sometimes less. And what I found to be helpful for me, if you kind of have two scenarios of this kind of slug, right? It's one like you said, who's dangerous, who's not doing what they need to do even at a bare minimum. And what you need to do is document everything that they do that is subpar, that is subsatisfactory, and explain to them why it is, and provide them as much training and remediation as you can, and document that remediation and training to show the paper trail that you're doing and making your efforts. But to call them on the carpet every time they're subpar, and that can get exhausting, but it has to be done. And also then set expectations, reasonable ones, for where they need to go if they want to succeed or if they want to improve. You need to give them benchmarks that they know that they're on that path.
Yeah.
and then meet with them regularly to do that.
Well,
That's for the
and
people who are like subpar. And then you have those guys who are just coasting. They're getting their satisfactory employee performance review every year, but they are not hopping on calls. They are not being proactive. They're not jumping up first to take the nasty stuff. And here's what I've done with them, and that seems to work. And everyone finds their place. Every squad's going to have some guys that want to go out and hoof it and do good work and go out and hunt the bad guys and look for criminals and actively pursue them. And that's awesome. And that's the kind of guys I want to work with. For the guy that's coasting, he's your transport car. He's your report car. He's your traffic accident car. He's doing all the bare minimum stuff that we do on a daily basis that doesn't take that many brain cells. And you leave your other guys who want to go out and be successful, you leave them free to go do what they want to do. And this guy gets to do, he still gets paid by the hour. He gets paid the same amount as everybody else, but he's going to go do those calls until he decides he wants a change. And it's not punitive. It's just using your resources in the best way that you can, because just like any supervisor, as a sergeant, you're allocating resources. You're managing the resources that are given to you by the department. And that resource, that solid coaster, is going to go handle the stuff that frees these other guys up to go do the elevated work.
That's right. Perfect way to handle it. And in a lot of ways, and so I know there are starting to be, especially after 2020, more and more discussions than ever that are taking place between police leadership in some communities and the unions in various communities, and that these are the types of things where you kind of have to look at certain types of the slugs and slackers as, are these folks harmless risks or are they true risks in terms of, all right, if I put, what situation can I put them in? And you just described a way to mitigate some of that in terms of putting them on the traffic duty rather than the much more dangerous types of tasks. So great way to analyze.
Well, it certainly didn't come without trial and error. That's for sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it never does. We're constantly learning, and everybody is fortunately or unfortunately different.
Well, that's hopefully part of our conversations here on the squad room is, if I can save some people the headache and the trials and tribulations of what I had to go through by sharing my experiences, but also talking with experts like you, then we're doing our job here. So let's move on to number 7. These are the 7 types of arsonists that are in your organization. This is, again, all from your book, The Arsonist in the Office. Number 7, the leeches. Quoting from the book, they want your time and your labor. They're using you and taking credit for your work, for the work you provide them. They also create an unbalanced relationship that kills your productivity and throw drama your way if you stop answering their calls for help. So dig into that one a little bit for me.
Yeah, you've got a lot of different backgrounds coming into departments, and people that have different pain thresholds, for lack of a better word. And I'm sure in a lot of cases that you've seen people that are constantly trying to pass off their paperwork to somebody else, or the duties that usually are split, and people just decide, you know what, it's not worth the hassle. I'll just go ahead and do it if this person isn't. But at some point, it starts being pretty corrosive, and you need, as leaders, if you've got these people within your department that are constantly slacking off, one, their skills are probably diminishing a bit, but 2, they're creating a level of dissension within the ranks that may not get on your radar screen immediately, but certainly are going to be causing people to just get sick of the job. What this also calls for is having a culture within your department or any organization to deal with conflict easily. Have managers that will take care of issues, but at lower level things like this, to say, hey, you know what? If you've got a problem with this person, you have them come talk to me, but don't go doing work that that someone else is supposed to be doing. Because with different personalities, you're going to find different people addressing those situations in different ways, but it certainly eats at people's motivation.
Yeah, I think for me, when I read this one, I think of the guy who rolls up on your call and just kicks up stuff, ticks off your suspect, antagonizes them, and then walks away with leaving you with more work. Or um, oftentimes, the one, man, I went through this one. I think everyone goes through this one. You're new on the job. You got a year or two in. You're still the boot, and you're the backup on a call, and you go, and the veteran hands everything over to you because you're the new guy, so you got to take it. Like, oh, and it's just something you deal with. But it feels oppressive at times. And then, of course, institutionally, what do you do when you become the veteran? If that's how you grew up in, you turn around and give it to the next generation, and that's not resolving it.
No, and y'all have enough problems intergenerationally with
Yeah,
with
right.
people too that yeah, you don't need that.
The one thing I think about on this one, on maybe the positive side, or something I took from this on the supervisor aspect of it, is when you make sergeant, your job changes. You're not doing the job you used to do anymore. And one of the things that trips us up, one of the things that tripped me up, is you got promoted because you were good at the job you used to have, but that doesn't mean it's still the same job that you're doing now, right? And a lot of guys and men and women who get promoted are a little unsure about their role as a sergeant, what they're supposed to do, how far do they penetrate into a problem versus let their officers handle it. And so they end up micromanaging because, again, they used to do that job well, so they know that, so I'll just do that, and they end up managing everybody. And that's can sometimes be that leech where you're just throwing work onto a situation where the work doesn't need to be done, and to be mindful of that. But then the flip side of that, to me, is that there are times as a sergeant you're going to fall into something. You're going to stop a DUI car, or you're going to turn the corner and there's going to be a fight in the middle of the street. And it's not your job anymore to take the paper on that, to drive the guy to the jail, to do the FSTs or test the coke. That's not your job. That's what the officers are there for. So understand that there are going to be times where you have to make work for your officers, but don't go out and actively seek the things that make their job harder. So when you do end up with say you're driving down the highway and a DUI in front of you, you pull him over and the guy's hammered. When your officer comes up, acknowledge the fact that you're making him more work for him and say, listen, I understand this is probably not what you want to be doing right now. And I would take this. However, I need to be available to respond to other people who need assistance as well. I appreciate you doing this. I will make sure that you're not always the person who has to handle this for me. It's something to that effect.
Yeah, and
And go
you're
ahead.
starting to create standards at that point, practices on how you lead, and you just touch on something that's a really big deal in terms of the um, where that sergeant may be pulling the information from on how they handle something, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got what could be a real snowball effect of they're thinking about it from their sergeant who didn't know what they were when they weren't trained particularly well, who may have been relying on somebody else who may not have been a great leader either. And this is where, man, training and the right practices, the right culture, and being taught good procedures and good values all the way down the food chain and constantly enforcing them matters in a big way, because this could be almost a generational thing where it
Mm-hmm.
carries on and on and on of people just pulling from, well, this is the way my sergeant did it. Well, it doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, if your sentence starts with "We've always done it that way," you should probably stop and pause and reevaluate what the end of that sentence really is going to mean, right?
Exactly.
All right, number 8. It's a long one, so I'm going to hopefully get through this without tripping over my tongue. The high and the mighty. It's funny to me too. Just to divert for a second, I'm willing to bet that anybody's listening to us now, every time I name one of these, every time I give a number and then a title, someone flashes into that listener's head before the description even, right? Like, Someone is already in someone's head when I say the high and the mighty, or the leeches, or the slackers. The high and mighty are closed-minded and general know-it-alls. They are static personalities as they believe that their perfection has already been reached and simply needs to be maintained. Think of John McEnroe, the spoiled brat of professional tennis in the 70s and 80s. Dr. Carol S. Dweck, professor of psychology at Stanford, summed him up in her book Mindset. McEnroe did not love to learn. He did not thrive on challenges. When the going got rough, he often folded. As a result, by his own admissions, he did not reach his own potential. McEnroe achieved the number one ranking in the world, but became best known for his on-court temper tantrums, which were often a cover for his own mistakes. McEnroe is a classic high and mighty. Spot them by asking in interviews about how well they fit at previous companies. If they're being truthful, they will usually already have a history of poor social skills and maladjustment to professional environments, as well as poor references despite potentially great individual performance. So yeah, let's talk about that one for a little bit. And that book too, Carol Dweck's Mindset book, that's a fantastic book. But
It is.
touch on that for me if you would.
Definitely worth a read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the high and mighty, those people that may have peaked several jobs ago, are going to be a real challenge to deal with for leaders, in that these people think they know everything because they read the book, they got through the academy. So you know what, I'm all set. I know everything that and you can't teach me. These are other situations where, like we talked about with one of the others, documentation is really, really important. Writing somebody when their behavior is unacceptable becomes very, very important. For no other reason, you may not be able to get rid of them, but you also can't send the message to the other officers or anyone within the organization that know everything behavior is acceptable, or frankly almost becomes a policy that we're willing to put up with that type of just ignorant way of going through a career. So you need to draw those lines frequently. You need to be talking about your organization's values frequently, and these people will often draw attention to themselves in ways that will send signals, but at times they may be signals that you almost welcome having come up, because they may reveal who they are, and that can be pretty helpful at times. That everybody sees that, okay, this person is absolutely not who should be looked at within an organization, and if you can't get rid of them, that may be the best position to have them in. That person that is not viewed as a leader anymore. They are not the go-to person for anything, and that may be the best situation to possibly have them in, if, like you say, they're difficult to get out.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of this one to me comes down to ego, and oftentimes I have found, and I think this is perhaps a weakness of my own, that to be to how to describe this, you fear not knowing everything, because you fear that would then somehow reveal you as a complete ignoramus, versus just being okay with not knowing something. And so you may get defensive about not knowing something, or you go out of your way to prove that you did in fact know what to do, or know something, or know the policy, or whatever it is. That's kind of my observation on that one. And though I certainly don't think of myself as a know-it-all, I probably have people at work who disagree with my self-assessment. But I think it just comes down a lot to ego on this one.
It does, and the high and mighty tend to be people that can't apply those things. They may know it, but they're not going to have the social skills, the street smarts to be able to apply it. And the good thing is, they may be so bad in the way they handle things, you may be able to isolate them to a certain extent and because of their ego, they may be okay with that. That, well, we don't want to bother you with onboarding of new officers. Maybe the biggest blessing you could have in not having them get involved in those types of things, or taking major leadership roles, and hopefully they would be not well received in the interviews to move up in the organization. But yeah, you're sure going to be having them yell out answers from the back of the room during group meetings.
Yeah. Or under their breath.
Exactly.
So number 9, the lone wolf. This character doesn't fit in the office and doesn't want to try. He or she is out of step with everyone else, out of sight of everyone else, and sometimes out of his or her mind. Their spinal columns are seemingly made of steel because they cannot compromise or give in, being tremendous egotists. The challenge with dealing with the lone wolf is that this person is often a high performer. And I think that last sentence is particularly accurate. Let's talk about the lone wolf.
Yeah, these are people that may be useful in certain ways, and we've talked about the labor and legal challenges in dealing with them in a lot of departments. They may be able to do some good for you. It's a question of being able to harness their talent and what they can't hurt you in. And so they're probably not going to be your future chief, not going to be taking on any roles of major significance. But if you can't get rid of them, it's good to identify that early and channel them into something where they may do you some good. Because
I think
people being not the warmest, not the friendliest, not people that work on teams. For instance, and not that IT would be the perfect example, but there's certain personalities where you can put people on a lot of projects, doing a lot of paperwork, doing a whole lot of different things that they'll do just fine at. You just don't want them leading anything.
Mm-hmm. I think there's more of this type in law enforcement than we would suspect. We're all trained. We're all trained with these ideas that, like, you're in charge, you make decisions. When you arrive on scene somewhere, it's your show, right? Like, people listen to you. Like, I mean, like, I can shut down a highway if I need to. Like, that's kind of cool in the abstract in a weird way, right? like so we're expected to make decisions, and then those decisions are typically reinforced in a positive manner, either informally or formally within the organization. And I think that lone wolves often gravitate towards things like law enforcement. And again, what I've found to work, and it's like trying to put reins on a wild horse sometimes, right? Like, to kind of get them under control, but to give them some parameters from within which they can work. Like, this is unacceptable to the left, and this is unacceptable to the right. So here's where you need to stay in the lane, but other than that, go forth. And then that egotist part, like, appeal to that part of them, and butter them up if you need to, and express the gratitude for their work. And because they're often, like you say here, they're high performers. They often are high performers, which means they've developed a skill that other people don't have. And the way to utilize them in a way that'll do you some good, like you say, is to make sure that skill gets passed on to the new people. And so appeal to that ego as, they are the coach or they are the guide, and that makes them the hero to the new guys. And that is how you can make them, contribute something to your organization, or if it's even if it's just to your own squad.
Yeah, and in business, having that niche, being a specialist is very valued, and make them, and it may be, find out what their strength is, and ride it. Let it work for your department, but know what you're dealing with.
The one thing I will say is to be careful when you are intentionally massaging that ego of the person. Do that in private. Don't do it in front of a group, because they'll just roll their eyes at you and they think that you're just drinking the Kool-Aid along with them. That was another observation on that one. All right, number 10, the last one, the drama queen, or just as likely the drama king, perpetually stuck in high school. This person thrives on information, news, or gossip, and if there isn't enough news to go around, they'll make it up or twist the facts. Molehills effortlessly turn into mountains unless you want your comments turned into the talk of the office. Never tell them a word about your business. If you do, expect it to be used against you. Well, I said earlier that police work is like high school. So I wasn't very far off from just saying work in general is like high school, huh?
And entire departments filled with it. Yeah, and this one very self-explanatory. But the biggest thing I would say, and this is where I get to talking so much about the need for strong cultures within the organization, and it being driven by leadership as much as possible. Don't tolerate it. Target it. Make sure that that is not an acceptable value within the organization, and do your best to tell people that want to go down that route that it's not going to be accepted. If possible, that is not going to be any way to advance, and eventually people get the message. And if not, call them out. Absolutely call them out, because there's almost nothing more corrosive than it having be known that it's okay to take people out at the knees.
And I think one of the things that's so frustrating and so disillusioning for people is that we think of police work as different than just going to your office at I don't know, the accounting firm, or you know working the front desk at a dentist's office or something like that. Because, and not to be corny about it, but there are life and death issues that we face on a daily basis, and it may not necessarily be our life or death, but we're certainly surrounded by it in other ways. And there's there's a culture. It's an informal culture that's probably in every organization, that we're brothers and sisters. We use that term all the time. I talk to people all the other cops are always we always refer to each other as brother or sister. Never met them before, but they're a brother or sister. And I love that language for the bond it creates, that band of brothers kind of bond. But um we sometimes assume this, and I think we want to assume this is more than a job. It's a brotherhood or sisterhood, and as such, these kinds of things wouldn't happen. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's funny that you focus on that verbiage, because, and I posted something. I got a lot of great reactions on social media about this. That using that language, as as heartfelt as it is, and it's an awesome imagery. It You would never think about, or most people would never think about, if they're in a family business, firing your brother because he's awful. You're going to do something with him, because you're going to be worried about, all right, the next reunion's going to be a mess.
Right.
I don't want to upset my sister-in-law. All these different things. And in families, you look at everybody as family, and the good thing is you feel like family, but you may be the Manson family. It doesn't mean it's a good family. It's some of those relationships. It can really cloud the clear thinking that would say, you know what, this person at this point really needs to be dealt with, in terms of the damage that they are doing, that we can't that we're looking at. All right, this guy has done X, Y, and Z, but he's my brother. We went to the academy together. He's done all these things. But if you didn't know him, you'd be firing him from you'd be trying to get rid of him. And that is, I mean, that's the heart of a lot of challenges. And it's both the plus and minus of such a tightly bonded culture, in that you're close, but you're almost too close. And I'm not suggesting doing anything with that bond, but it definitely creates those dynamics of, it's tough to deal with things sometimes, and I think that's part of it. That y'all are so close to everything, and you do have that bond, and you do socialize together, because other people don't understand all the dynamics of what you guys see every day. And that is awesome, and it's also a problem.
Yeah, it's
Just getting bad with it. It just is.
right. We like you just touched it. Like, we're a family, but it doesn't mean we're a functional one.
No.
Because I mean, there's no other job, not even the fire service really has a job where you're, how many meals have I had on the trunk of a police car at 3 a.m. with your partners, laughing and joking and then off to a call, where lives are on the line. So it definitely builds something that I can only think of as akin to that military connection where they have the same language and the same culture around it. And it does explain why it's so hard to get rid of some of these people and why some people just don't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up to the civil service process, or maybe they just don't feel it. And in going through this, just to wrap up for us, these 10 toxic kinds of personalities in the workplace. I joked a bit ago that as I read the title, anyone listening probably has someone in mind before they even hear the description. But I also, wonder if people will take the time and take the time to be honest with themselves and to do a self-assessment to see where they see themselves in any of these 10 types of toxic people, because I think that all of us have some of this trait in us, and this job is very hard on you and can be corrosive to your psyche and your wellness. And we talked about stress at the beginning, and everybody's going to experience some form of burnout, some form of disillusionment, some form of organizational stress in their lives, and they're going to see parts of any of one of these 10 kinds of toxic behavior come about. And I certainly, like I touched on with the high and mighty, I've certainly seen that in myself. I've seen myself act as the finger pointer at times, or early on, certainly as the gossip before I realized that was a horrible idea. What are the things that listeners can do if they're really truly honest with themselves? Not only are they thinking of other people in some of these, they're thinking about themselves, but where do they start? Well, where do they stop this behavior and then start to change that? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah. And I hesitate to use such touchy-feely terms, but
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, become self-aware. In reading through my book, shameless plug, but you read through these things, and I get a lot of comments from people saying exactly what you say. All right, I see a little bit of myself in this, and knowing that is half the battle. And being that one day when you're being a complete jerk about something doesn't mean you're doing it all the time. But knowing what the signs of problems are, I've got in another chapter the 20 signs of a toxic organization. Those are going to be pretty familiar to everybody as well. Some of them they may not have thought of, but those things where, for instance, with feedback within an organization, when there's a meeting taking place and people ask if there's any questions when you've had a serious discussion about something, and there's absolute silence in the room. Well, you've got a problem at that point, in that if nobody wants to say anything, they may have learned the lesson that you don't speak up when there's any issues going on, and that can really hurt an organization. Those types of things, as a leader, if when you're talking and nobody's giving you any type of feedback, not nodding their head, not offering any other thoughts, you may have some problems there. And so it's good stuff to read. Certainly, any given day we can all be an arsonist, but if it's lasting, if you're institutionalizing it, you got some work to do.
All right. Well, Pete Havel, the book is The Arsonist in the Office, Fireproofing Your Life Against Toxic Coworkers, Bosses, Employees, and Cultures. Pete, thanks for taking the time to go through these 10 types of toxic workers. I think it's very valuable to understand and put a framework around what those people are, our own behaviors at times, and how we can, as you say, self-aware. I don't think that's touchy-feely at all. I use that term all the time on the show. And it's such a key tenet of leadership in general, is that to lead others, you got to lead yourself. And to lead yourself, you have to know where you're at, which means you have to be aware. Right. And so this really great primer on this. The rest of the book is chock full of great stuff too, and great advice. And also, honestly, how to create a good exit strategy if you realize, this isn't the place for me. So highly recommend everyone go over to Amazon and pick this up. I really enjoyed this book. Pete, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
All right, thanks for listening to this interview with Pete Havel. Again, the book, I highly recommend it. The Arsonist in the Office, Fireproofing Your Life Against Toxic Coworkers. You can go to thesquadroom.net for the show notes for this episode if you want to find a link for the book, or just go to Pete Havel, HAVEL.com for more information on Pete. Really appreciate him coming on the show. It's the first time we've ever talked on the show about toxicity and coworkers, and kind of surprised it took me so long to have this topic come up, because it is such a prominent issue for all of us. You know, whether we're the toxic one or whether we're dealing with those toxic people, they can be such a resource drain, such an exhaustion on your mentality and on your mindset and on your willingness to come to work. And the absolute worst is when your boss is the toxic person in the relationship. There's nothing more demoralizing than experiencing being someone who's excited to come to work, who wants to be proactive, who wants to go out and do good work, and they just get dumped on by someone above them that's completely toxic. So, I often, if you're new to the show, I always try to take these ideas that we talk about back to the concept of badges, like the badge we wear on our chest. And of course, badges stands for beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service. And I think so much of what we talked about today with Pete is how our beliefs are the first thing to go on our way towards being that toxic person. How when we begin to believe that the world's out to get us, or when we begin to believe that we're singled out, or we begin to believe that the job isn't important anymore. That's a common one right now, right? Or we begin to believe that all of society wants to defund us. When we believe those things, that's the first step towards becoming that toxic coworker. And of course, there's plenty of ways to combat that in terms of the fact that many of those statements aren't true. But once we start to believe those things begin to, of course, those beliefs affect our thoughts. Those are our thoughts, really. And then our actions are quick to come on the heels of those negative beliefs. Our negative beliefs are almost always, just like our positive beliefs, our negative beliefs are almost always going to inform negative action. You can't have a negative thought motivate you towards positive action. Negative thoughts only go down the hill with negative action. And it does, to get to the D of it, take some discipline. It takes discipline to remain operational, but also situationally aware, so that you understand that though there may be feelings or there may be times where you feel negative, or that you feel that people are out to get you, or you feel that the entire society is out to get you or defund you, it takes discipline to understand that that is not the case, and that perhaps we are too involved in our own echo chamber. We're talking to too many of the same people that believe too many of the same things. And it takes discipline to keep perspective. I hope that makes sense. And, our goals, if you become that toxic person, it's really hard to maintain any sort of focus on the goals or the long-term things you want to do, because the long-term, when you become that toxic person, the long-term seems like it's pointless. And so goals just go out the window. And, in emotions, of course, when you are the toxic person, I wish I had the quote in front of me, and I can't remember if it's Seneca, Epictetus, or Marcus Aurelius, but something the equivalent of, your emotions are like a fish on a hook. And if you get hooked by your emotions, they are going to jerk you around left, right, up, and down. And so one of the goals, if you find yourself as being in a toxic mindset, is to make sure that your emotions aren't controlling what you do. And that's really hard. That's hard for me too. It's hard for me to understand that my emotions might be driving my toxicity, and not the way someone talked to me at work, or not the way that a rumor I heard, or something like that. And so keeping our emotions in check is important. Now, on the flip side of that, when you're the person who's dealing with the toxic person, when you're the person who's supervising the toxic person, that's when it's really easy for our emotions to kick in and we respond to an emotional person, because toxicity really is emotion in a lot of ways. When we respond to a toxic person who's in an emotional state with more emotion, we just throw fuel on the fire. And so if you manage a toxic person, always be mindful of the emotions that it brings up for you when you're dealing with them. And then, of course, the last essence, badges, service, from a perspective of a supervisor, I try to remember these are still employees. These are still people who come to work and potentially are willing to give their life in service of something greater than themselves. They just still deserve respect. There's a very good chance that this person is this way because of something that happened either organizationally or in their lives, and it is not their preferred method of operating. There's very few people in the world that I think truly prefer to be toxic. I think 99% of the people out there want to live happy, healthy lives, and they want to contribute, and they want to be part of the team. And the toxicity sets in when we haven't been able to strike the right chord with them to engage them. And so think of it as, if you're the leader of an organization, or if you're the leader of a group of people and you have toxic employees, think of it as your job in service of them to work towards striking that right chord, to find the right motivation, to find their purpose and help inspire them towards something greater that they can look towards, and they can hopefully move out of toxicity, because it's completely possible. I've been toxic at times in my life and my career, and I think any of us who are have any time on the job, who've experienced anything, who've maybe been shorted by what the gap between what they want and what their expectations are, or what happens and what their expectations are. Anytime that those things happen, we enter an environment where it's capable for us to become that toxic person. And so look inward, and evaluate what worked for you, or maybe you're still there, but create a path for how to get out of it. All right, real quick before I let you run, I want to offer you something that I'm very excited about, and it's absolutely free. We're launching Tactical Tuesdays, a free weekly email where we bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. Maybe about a book I want to share, gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else that I think you'd like. To sign up for Tactical Tuesdays email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays. That's plural, Tactical Tuesdays. Or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check out the show notes for this episode, and you can find it there. I promise we won't spam you. We won't text you back with excessive information. All we need is your name and your email address, and you can get started on our Tactical Tuesday list that starts this week, and it'll come out every Tuesday. Have 3-4 items that we think will be of interest to you. Now, if you want to know how you can support the show, there's a few ways you can do that. Most importantly, if you heard something today that you got some value out of this conversation with Pete, or something that I said, or that's something that Pete said, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. And if you got a few extra seconds, please consider leaving a comment with your review. That really helps us learn how to serve you better. Second, share this episode or any other episode you love with people you need to hear it. You can share our episodes right from our webpage at thesquadroom.net and from most podcast players. And of course, if you didn't know, we're now on YouTube. Now, the show's not video yet, but if you're in an environment where you can't listen on your phone or you can't listen on the radio, but you have access to YouTube, you can go search for the Squad Room Podcast, and all of our episodes in full length are right there on YouTube for you to stream right from your computer. Also, join our Facebook group and follow me on Instagram at the Squad Room. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.